Krystal Ball of the show Rising on the Hill took some incoming fire from both liberals and leftists for some comments that she made on her show. Let's take a look at those comments.
My view on immigration is not the same as Tucker Carlson's. Let's be clear about that. And I think there are legitimate reasons to criticize his approach in terms of a sort of nativist, xenophobe, all of that. But I also think you have to give him credit. Is there anyone on MSNBC who's critical of Democrats in the way that he's willing to be critical of this president?
Zero. No.
I mean, you have to give him credit for that, for being willing to dissent, which has real consequences, as we know,
yes,
on a mainstream network, on a very highly rated show, one that the president watches and
every
listens
night
to. So it's very high stakes in that way. And I think that, you know, for all the problems with Fox News, which there are many, and it is basically most hours like Republican cheerleading in the way that MSNBC is Democratic Party cheerleading. But I don't think there's any voice on MSNBC at this point that is nearly as independent-minded as he is.
So there was a bunch of outrage on Twitter over this. Some, relatively decent-sized account tweeted that clip, and there were a bunch of people. There were liberals, but there were also leftists who were like, against her saying what she said there. And, as far as I could tell, the arguments are like, hey, Tucker Carlson is terrible. Tucker Carlson is bigoted. Tucker Carlson is racist. So for you to voice this kind of tepid support is either purposefully or inadvertently boosting him, and you don't want to do such a thing. Never give him credit. And this is, what I saw a lot of is that drill tweet where it's like, I take back what I said. Under no conditions do you have to hand it to the group ISIS. And, it's a funny tweet for what it's worth. But I do think that this has led to a pretty big split on the left, and it's not just in regards to what Krystal said here, but it's in regards to any time you have strange bedfellows in politics. And I think that the left, in all seriousness, oftentimes when they get angry over stuff like this, I think it's really silly. Because in that clip, Krystal said he's a xenophobe, and I don't agree with him when it comes to the issue of immigration and many other issues. And does everybody understand why she said that? Here's why she said that. Because he's a xenophobe, and she thinks he's a xenophobe, and she is not with him on those issues. So, see, this is the point that we're at, and it kind of drives me crazy, is that even when she gives the qualification of the statement, people now have given themselves license, just like, ignore that part. Ignore the part where she said the thing that I want her to say, and just focus on the latter part that she said, because, oh my God, isn't Tucker Carlson so evil, and anything but full-throated denunciation 100% of the time is agreement or endorsement of him. And I think that's ridiculous. I think that's absurd. And anybody who thinks about this stuff objectively and in a nuanced way, listen, you'd understand quickly. You have any idea how often Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul used to work together? Bernie Sanders worked with Mike Lee, a Republican senator with a lot of odious beliefs, but he worked with him on ending the genocide in Yemen. Now, if we want to have this same kind of mindset that people were having against Krystal on Twitter, well, then you could look through all of what Mike Lee has said over the years and find stuff that's objectionable, and then cancel Bernie and accuse him of being tepidly in agreement with Mike Lee on those things. But see, that wouldn't be true. That wouldn't be accurate. Bernie doesn't agree with Mike Lee on those things, which is why he didn't work with Mike Lee on those things. Krystal doesn't agree with Tucker Carlson on the immigration position and the xenophobia, and she literally says, I don't agree with him on the immigration and the xenophobia. And by the way, if you want somebody to call Tucker out at a time when it's necessary to call him out, she's going to do it. She's going to do it. So what are we doing here? What is this conversation that we're really having? The idea that in the case of somebody like Tucker, you're literally never allowed to say, all right, you know what? Credit where it's due. I don't agree with you on all these issues, but here's an issue where I agree with you. You're not allowed to do that? You're not allowed to do that. So Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders can't work together on ending the drug war because Ron Paul way back in the day, had racist newsletters that were written in his name. Therefore, if Bernie works with him, he agrees with him on the racist newsletter. But that's fundamentally not true. So the only way you could take that position is if you're willing to play pretend and willing to just say, screw you to anybody who ever offers a credit where credit is due take. Guys, I got news for you. Tucker Carlson has repeatedly taken an anti-war position. Now, you could say it's not far enough, it's only in certain instances, and, there are specifics to disagree with him on. Sure, absolutely. But there are times he's taken the anti-war position. He invited John Bolton on his show and berated him for the world to see. There are times he's taken a position that's not as bad as other Republicans on trade. For us to say that, for us to point that out, that's called basic honesty. To not tell the truth about those things is disingenuous. To pretend like he says the same things on war as neocon Republicans, I would be lying to you if I said that, because he doesn't say those things. I'm not allowed to point out an objective fact of reality because you might interpret that as more widespread agreement than I actually have with him? No, piss off. And here's the final point on this, and this is what I think is even more important, and a point that people on the left never seem to grasp, the people on the left who disagree. Why is it we're all so concerned about, what I like to call, or what many people have called, a gateway into the right? Because I think that's the real concern about what Krystal's doing here, is they think like, oh, the fact that you gave credit where credit is due, but Tucker is overall an odious figure on the political scene, and he's a bigot and all these things. The fact that you did that, you're providing people like this alt-right pipeline, this gateway into right-wing beliefs, and therefore what you're doing is not okay, and we're going to attack you as if Krystal's like the enemy or something. And why on earth do people never flip that and think of the opposite dynamic? Do you realize that if you're willing to give credit where credit is due, but also vehemently, strongly disagree and call out when somebody's wrong, that you could actually provide a gateway out of odious right-wing beliefs? So, in other words, if somebody who might be, let's say somebody who's a Tucker Carlson fan, flat out watches the show every night and all that stuff, tunes in to the show Rising, Sagar is a right-winger. And so at first they start listening and, oh, I like this guy Sagar. He seems to agree with me on all this stuff. And they, follow along with him. And then they hear Krystal, who's on the left, say, hey, man, I don't agree with Tucker. I think he's wrong on all these issues. I think he's pretty xenophobic, but he's right on this, this, and this. Do you not understand that that actually can provide a gateway out of the right wing where somebody goes, oh, okay, that's weird. I was told the left wing doesn't do nuance. I was told that the left wing just shuns and cancels and, treats things in on or off, black or white, yes or no. Well, here you have a nuanced take from an intelligent lefty who's saying credit to Tucker on the war position. Great, cool. But then is willing to criticize him on other areas where he's wrong. Well, hold on now. Let me hear out this criticism, because I don't think the source is a ridiculous person, because they just gave credit where credit is due. So, and then point is, you can have this concept, this dynamic of a gateway out of the right if you're willing to be intellectually honest and give credit where credit is due. No, hell no, I'm not going to give Tucker credit when he's wrong. Like when it comes to immigration, when it comes to bigoted positions, when it comes to terrible things he said. I think in many ways he's a fake populist and he tries to use economic leftism to hook people into a more odious Republican agenda. We can have those conversations, but don't tell me I can't give credit where credit is due if it's freaking due. Because then that would be, you're telling me to lie. You're telling me to be disingenuous. You're telling me to mislead my audience. I'm not going to mislead my audience. I'm going to tell them the truth across the board. And so if that means I say credit where credit is due here, but I vehemently call out and disagree with and argue on another point, so be it. So point is, guys, this approach of like, I want to do full-throated condemnation all the time, that's moronic. That's not the way the world works. And by the way, if you're going to go down that road, okay, well then I hope none of the people who are making those arguments are going to vote for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a rapist. Joe Biden is a war criminal. Why is it Tucker's position on immigration is so beyond the pale that you can't give credit where credit is due and you can't have a nuanced view, but Joe Biden being a war criminal, that's not beyond the pale? That's not beyond the pale. Why isn't Joe Biden canceled? Why isn't he shunned? He's a sexual assaulter. He penetrated somebody with his fingers against their will, rape. So why is it's so selective in how the rules are enforced? It's so selective. Certain people never give them any credit under any circumstance ever. Other people not only give them credit, but overlook all the bad things and wrong things they did and act accordingly. See, the rules are not objective. The rules are not fair. The rules are selective and they're ridiculous. And even to people who are on the left, who were against what Krystal did here, I don't know what to say to you other than you got to kind of grow up a little bit. And the reason why this was very tepid praise is because it's tepid because she doesn't agree with him on the same things that you don't agree with him on. It's really that simple. So, from now on, if people want to be more nuanced and objective and give credit where credit is due, I got news for everybody. You're going to provide a pipeline out of the alt-right. That's what you're going to do. And you're going to turn people who were otherwise wrong about most things, if not everything, you will eventually make them more reasonable and maybe even vote for the right people. Maybe even vote for people who want to make a positive change for good. So, and lest people turn around and say, well, you don't know about that dynamic. I do, actually, because that's what this show has done. And those are the things I'm most proud of, is when I hear from people like, hey, man, I was going down a bad path, whoever they were listening to, whether it's Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or, I don't care, you fill in the blank, Tucker Carlson. I've heard many people who went from the furthest fringes of the internet on the right, like where it is terrifying. I've heard from people who have told me directly, you are the reason I am out of that. And one of the reasons why that happens is because I'm willing to be open and honest across the board. And if that means every now and then saying, hey, this person who I disagree with on 80% of stuff made a decent point here, so be it. Because you can't be afraid of what the truth is. You can't be afraid of the truth. Truth is always a defense. And, if you're willing to be that objective, if you're willing to be that nuanced, then you gain a lot of credit in the minds of people who otherwise disagree with you. And you can, over time, have them agree with you. And this is not something that many people on the left... I do think it's fair to categorize the people who were like outraged by what Krystal said here. I do think it's fair to call them like the overly woke left. And I hope they have fun being a permanent edgy subculture as opposed to an emotionally intelligent, serious movement that gets the reins of power and then implements positive change.